Ex-assistants to rich, powerful people. What's the most messed up behavior you witnessed during your employment? Serious. I became friends with a colleague, a delightfully wealthy man and a minor member of European royalty. He wore bespoke suits on his time off. Like, he specifically had them made for lounging. He had a £12,000 walking suit. He was very kind and affable. However, out of touch with reality he was. I taught him how to order pints at the pub. The first time I showed him how to do it, he didn't have money because he never carried a wallet. He was in his 40s and led an active social life, but always had a servant on hand to do everything. I work for a very wealthy family in the commercial real estate market, and the one thing I have noticed is how much they lack a sense of time. They have had people doing everything for them for so long they no longer realize how long it takes to complete a task. One example. Hey, take this deposit to bank A, it has to be deposited today. So it's 4:50, they close at 5 o'clock and it is a 25-minute trip one way. Using my old account, I work with, or for, this really old guy who is in his 80s. He tells me stories all the time from his past of all the crazy crap he's done there before coming to America and making his fortune here. The country he is from is known for corruption, especially in the past when he was there. He was a son of an influential and rich politician. In his teenager years he used to basically do whatever he wanted. Think the devil's double but on a smaller scale. He said girls used to flock to him no matter what because he had money like that. There was this one girl he said didn't give him any chances and he really wanted her. So he took her and threw her into the car, taking her to the middle of the forest before coercing her into having sex. Pretty much freaking rape. The girl's dad found out and he complained to the police. Instead of taking my CEO to jail, they made up a phony charge against the dad and threw him in jail. The dad was forced to drop the charges for his freedom. The police, the judge and any person with influence was in this guy's pocket. That's one of the most freaked up things I ever heard, and he told the story almost as if he's proud of it. This is easily the saddest thing I've read in this thread, because it depicts an entire community that's willing to sacrifice the safety of innocent people for money and power. Ideally, a community should be willing to sacrifice money and power for the protection of individual people. I worked for owners, 3 brothers of a private bank, and managed their properties. One had first edition uncut classic books purely for decoration. He also had a Rolls which required new tires due to sitting unused for months at a time. The steel belt flattened from the weight of the car. One wife called me all but accusing me of eating an $8 pizza at their country club, which after numerous far more than $8 international calls turned out to be her son in town having lunch. This from someone with a running balance over $10 million on any given day. This from someone with a running balance over $10 million on any given day. My brain can't compute this. I interned at a production company. The CEO made me go get a new BlackBerry for him. Took 4 hours to go downtown because it had to be bought in downtown LA for whatever reason. When I brought it back, he opened the plastic, turned it on, and asked what the frick is this? Why aren't my numbers on it? Well, it's brand new. You haven't updated it yet. This is useless. What the frick have you been doing for 4 hours? Well, I was. Smash. And he threw it on the ground. Literally. Just smashed it. Freaking useless. I was flabbergasted. Old masters oil paintings and modernist masterpieces. Recognizable ones you studied in school, leaning up against the wall, stacked against each other. Also, the wife's $40,000 per place setting china from which she ate her boxed mac and cheese. I used to work for a company hosting luxury car driving events, where the customers came for a week or a weekend to learn to drive the latest models on ice. Most of the customers were polite or even nice, but whenever we hosted the Russian groups, everyone knew all bets were off. These guys had never heard a no that couldn't be turned into a yes with a wad of cash. The most memorable incident was when 2 of them flew in 3 assumed Russian prostitutes for a gangbang and had their driver drop said prostitutes off at the airport the next morning just before picking up these guys' wives from the same airport. I was told by the cleaning staff that the room they'd used was covered in blood and crap amongst other things. In high school, I helped do IT for a billionaire at his ranch. This guy had a private fiber run 40+ miles out there. I put network drops, routers, desktop PCs, and TVs into several barns and guest houses. I was out there once working right before the owner was coming for a visit with some friends. Everything had to be perfect, so I was replacing some never been used year-old computers with the latest never to be used models. Something went wrong with the shipping, and some things weren't on time. I talked to his assistant, and some guy flew the gear out the next day. This was the 90s and we're talking some routers and a couple of Dells. Blew my teenage mind. I was also impressed by his personal chefs, husband and wife, who arrived a few days before he did. Up until then, I don't think I really believed people still had full-time staff like that. They were Italian and didn't speak much English. Mostly they just shouted at each other. It was awkward when I was installing gear in the kitchen. They were yelling and occasionally throwing things, but were very nice to me. Made me lunch one day even. Best sandwich I've ever had. I got to meet some of the other staff as well, and it was so weird to me. The ranch foreman basically ran the place like it was his, but there was no profit or anything. It just existed for the 1 or 2 times a year someone came out. Horses, some cattle, chickens, the whole deal. Just sort of hanging out. He made 6 figures. The pilot who flew the computers out did all sorts of errand running, exclusively for this one guy. If there was no tasks, he just relaxed. He said he sometimes got to spend a week or more someplace exotic, just in case he was needed. That honestly sounds like a dope situation for everyone involved. The CTO of an IT company I worked for was born into a rich family and didn't know how to talk with his inferiors. He was so bad at human interaction our CEO forced him to go to some kind of class to learn how to interact with humans. This douchebag loved Porsches. He drove a couple to work, and he had one who would race at amateur races occasionally. One day one of our co-workers failed to meet us for lunch because he was broadsided on the way to the restaurant. For some reason after the accident he came back to work. We were standing around his cube and he's telling us about his car getting totaled when the CTO walked up. After hearing the story the CTO says, and I'm not embellishing, at least it wasn't a Porsche. Then he laughed and walked off. I think I know the CTO. The director of my former company was a nice enough woman, but she used her position to get employees to do everything for her. The head of human resources and finance was required to help manage her personal bank accounts, enroll her children in school, book her holidays, everything. She also had a nanny for her younger kids who was somehow being paid through the company for tax purposes, and so she wouldn't have to outlay the money. This is what Leona Helmsley went to prison for. I had a pro golfer hire me solely to list 90% of his belongings on eBay. Everything from huge TVs to golf club head covers. The odd part was he wanted everything listed for $0.99 and shipped as fast as possible when it inevitably sold. I lost that job when he went to jail for procuring said items with illegally gained funds from his invalid sister's inheritance. I was questioned, but since I had no idea how he got rich, no charges were ever brought up on me. I just thought he was a weird eccentric rich guy that wanted new toys, and I assumed he had invested his pro golf earnings over the years. He was sponsored by Nike after all. Probably illegal, but I would have gotten a friend to buy a bunch of the expensive crap for me as soon as I listed it. My first job was being an assistant to the CEO of a small warehouse-based wholesaler operated as a pet project of a very rich man. The owner had a 5-year-old toddler at the time, and calling the kid spoiled would be like referring to the Pacific Ocean as moderately damp. This was one of those situations where it was crystal clear the kid had never, ever been told no to anything or had any sort of discipline. For some inexplicable reason the owner would bring him to work almost every day and let him run free, as the warehouse and accompanying offices were one large interconnected building. This often meant there'd be this toddler running around either breaking things, unpacking boxes, and generally making the entire warehouse staff's job a ton more harrowing than they should have been, as it was quite clear that making the kid angry in any way would result in the culprit losing their job. Which did happen at least once during my time there, when I wasn't refilling the coffee pot, Xeroxing, or running Cat 5 cable. The vast majority of my time was spent trying to keep the kid away from the shipping conveyor and the other places in the building that could deliver a quick and painful death to the unwary. TLDR. Rich boss bringing spoiled kid to work daily is the worst thing ever. Dude probably just took his kid there hoping the little bastard would get killed. Not an assistant per se, but I did have a short-term IT contract gig at an investment firm of some kind. Small business, huge money. Don't think anyone there wasn't some 3-letter job title millionaire. Got to observe some business stuff. Most of the offices, for the upper up, actually they all seem to be upper ups, had private bathroom. If someone was out for a meeting or whatever of site, multiple people would intentionally take the nastiest shoots in that person's private bathroom, and not like one person. Like 6 or 7 in series, performing some kind of pre-planned unholy train of battleships of war, stench and destruction. Seriously, they timed this. Giggling like a bunch of prep school teenagers in suits that cost more than my paycheck. And the fricked up part, it was like a routine thing around there. Everyone was doing it to everyone else. Guy would come back, find his private throne closet reeking of death and colonic waste demons hanging thick enough in the air you could distort visible light, and be laughing their asses off lol. Oh, you guys got me. Haha. Got em good this time. What made it more unsettling was there seemed to be a kind of etiquette system built into the activity too. Apparently if someone was actually mad at you, they'd skip flushing, or run hot water to add extra steam, and half the time the victim could accurately name the last person who'd attacked the bathroom. I imagine this was fun for the janitor. Worked IT for a small company. The boss was Mormon, and so every 9 months there was another kid running around. One day he called me at home to drive across town and help him with his home network for some under the table money. The neighborhood was gated and the guard was looking so far down his nose at my 1986 Civic that I thought his neck would break. The house was huge, but I knew something was wrong the moment I walked in the door. I have never seen such filth. I had no idea people could live like that. The maid hasn't come yet. Sorry for the mess. Yes, that man just said they use a maid service, so this was likely just a single week's worth of crap. The high chairs in the dining area were absolutely surrounded by garbage and food, dirty clothes everywhere, etc. I guess when you have money you don't even need to clean your room anymore. I have indeed seen homes with lots of kids where they just freaking give up on that aspect. I give up and I'm just one guy. I had a role that was nominally professional in a firm which was, and is, one of the UK's largest suppliers of household goods. More and more I got diverted into special transactions, and when I jibbed at it, was initially threatened then fired. The owner of the business, a gentleman from a foreign nation where it's still culturally 1949, was using the business to pay for his entire personal life, all his holidays, the apartment and care of his bigamous second wife and family, and major bribes to leading political figures in his homeland. Can't say too much as case pending, but I understand half the board of directors of the firm that nominally employed me are now facing jail. I talked to the authorities after they fired me. I also forwarded all the evidence to the ambassador of his home country. If they act on it, he's in crap so deep it can hardly be comprehended. It's far down in the thread, but I so hope this one is true. I used to be the assistant of a celebrity photographer in NYC, mostly hip hop celebrities and New York nightlife. This guy fricked so many women behind his wife's back, it was obscene. Once there was this model who needed portraits taken, but my boss was fricking her and his wife was suspicious, so he had me take the pictures instead. Except he drove me there with his wife, but had to drop me off across town so his wife wouldn't know where I was going. Had to walk 20 blocks to get to the model's apartment. Also, if we worked until 3 AM, which was common, I would have to crash at his place or else I would have to sit in Penn Station for hours until the first NJ transit train. He made me sleep on the floor. Even though he had a couch, I had to sleep on the floor. Everyone involved in the NYC upper class are bastards. Bastard coated bastards with bastard filling. Just waiting to frick you over. Once there was this model who needed portraits taken, but my boss was fricking her and his wife was suspicious, so he had me do it. For a minute there, I thought he made you go frick the model to prove to his wife he wasn't doing it. My ex-GF's little sister was dating and is now married to a rich older guy, much older. I heard some tearful confessions about how she was forced to have threesomes with him and prostitutes, etc. Also, she used to babysit for his kids and they started dating when she was about 15 and he was closer to 50. I was briefly an assistant to a CEO of a large company in my country. I live in Northern Europe, and this guy was a real butthole to everyone. I just made coffee, ran with mail and copied things. I say briefly, because I only worked there for 3 weeks. I made an honest mistake, copying the wrong documents, resulting in a brief embarrassment on his side in an in-house meeting with some of the other big guys of the firm. I got called into his office, and knowing his history with previous assistants, I was visibly nervous. He then began absolutely shredding me for 15 minutes, completely red in the head, spit flying in my face as he stood above me, basically ripping me a new one. I started crying. This was my first job, and I was 15 at the time, and he stopped shouting. He took one finger to my chin, lifted my face up so I looked straight at him, and then he said, "You're nobody. Don't you ever forget that," and then he threw some paperwork at me to let me officially know that I was fired, which I then had to pick up from the floor, and then he yelled at me to get the heck out of his office. TLDR. Got fired for copying wrong documents. Boss ripped me apart for 15 minutes and made me cry. First job ever. You're nobody. Don't you ever forget that. I thought buttholes like these only existed in movies. I used to work at a luxury car dealership as a mechanic. When the market tanked in 2007 to 2008, we were all convinced to take $1 per hour pay reduction. That year the owner bought a Maserati and we all got watches for Christmas for hitting some goal. He wasn't super rich and powerful, but I used to work for a pretty reputable set of attorneys a few years ago. I started off file clerk and went up to receptionist. Anyways, one of the attorneys specifically just did not got a crap about his kids whatsoever. He didn't know their ages or their birthdays. He would have the office manager mark down all these things on her own personal calendar so that she could prepare gifts and whatnot for their birthdays. She even had her paying all their bills and rents. Some were in college, with his checks. One of his stepdaughters worked there for many years and he would sometimes forget about her and leave her in the office alone. She would have to call just to get picked up. The attorney was a pretty crappy guy, but his complete lack of interest or care in his children's lives always disturbed me. Over the summer one year, I signed up to be an extra for a film by a man who had won an Oscar for directing a particular film because I liked theater. When I got there, I actually ran into the director almost immediately, who proceeded to tell me that I would no longer be an extra, even though I said twice, "No, sir, I'm supposed to be in these 3 scenes," and instead would be his wife's assistant for the day. She wasn't in the movie, she was just observing all day, but she still had a change of clothes for when she left that needed to go in a dressing room again, even though she wasn't acting in the movie. The guy, from what I can tell, is just the egotistical kind of wealthy, and not actually super rich, but the Oscar went to his head and he used it as an excuse to treat everyone on set like crap. Please tell us who the director was. Please, I beg you. I held the corgis while she gave them each a suppository, posting before I read the comments, but guessing this rates no more than a 3/10 on the messed up scale. CEO boss lady was built like a linebacker. I'm 115 pounds wet and small. When I had a seizure in the office, don't have to mention that it was stress related. Her demeanor, devil wears Prada without the earned respect in the industry to somewhat justify its inhumanity. She climbed on top of me and shoved a stapler in my mouth so I would not bite my tongue. Didn't get off when a nurse told her she was making it worse. Had to be pulled off by fire and EMS. I mean, she cared, right? I nannied for a tech millionaire. His wife had a raging eating disorder, which she covered up by being an athlete, and he didn't care enough to address. They had 3 children that she couldn't stand. She had a full-time housekeeper and 2 nannies to keep her kids from interacting with her. When dad was around, all smiles. As soon as he wasn't, she would get as far away from the kids as possible. She also signed them up for loads of activities so that she never had to see them. They all were in therapy at very, very young ages. I nannied for a couple of other families like this. Wives don't work but don't interact with their kids either. They just shop and lounge all day. And there's domestic violence in these families that's super well hidden. I saw a husband inches from his wife's face, shouting his head off because they were out of post-it notes, and me and the other nanny just kept right on cleaning because we needed the job. Ugh. I hate rich people. They have the kind of problems that money doesn't fix. They have the kind of problems that money doesn't fix. I just love way you put it. I may or may not have carried a coked out girlfriend and a large amount of drugs out of my boss's house, CEO of a very large company, while she was covered in puke and see so his wife wouldn't catch him as she arrived home from her sister's house a day early. Full story. My old boss regularly cheated on his wife with any number of women. Well, he calls me one day, because we are friends away from work, and asks me to come to his apartment ASAP. I drive over there and he's blitzed and this chick is laying naked in her own vomit. Maybe his too. Mumbling about something. He says he has to shower and clean the vomit up because his wife is 10 minutes away, so please get that C out of here. I grab the girl and help her to her feet and cover her up with a shirt. As I'm walking her out, he yells for me to grab the party bag. The only bag is a dop kit. I grab it, jump in my car and drive off. This chick is blasted. She doesn't know where she lives and is sure she's having a heart attack. So I calm her down somewhat and reach in her purse and find her ID. Luckily she has her current address on it and I take her home. I drive back to my house and pull into the driveway and remember the dop kit. I open it up and there's a sugar cube sized piece of M3, approx, grams of kind bud, and what has to be an 8 ball of C. Someone who isn't me smoked the bud but sold at way below market value, the M and the C. I got a steak dinner and a few beers later that week from the boss. Needless to say, I no longer work there. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.